And I think we're at a point now within a lot of our organizations where we're faced with a very difficult challenge. And that is, we've oftentimes separated managers and leaders. Right? So we say that managers and leaders are two separate people. And I'll prove it. So when you think of a manager, what do you think of? What are some words or associations or themes or terms that you think of? Anybody, just raise your hand or call it out. What was that? Efficiency. Okay, for manager, what else? What? Numbers. What else? What was that? Take risk. What was that one? Process. Accountability. Okay, now when I say the word leader, what do you think of? Do you guys see how different the words are? Do you see how different we even think about between a manager and a leader? And it's interesting because this is what we think of all the managers within our organization. Whenever we hear the word manager, we think, okay, this guy is process-oriented. He doesn't lead. He doesn't inspire. He doesn't empower. And when we think of leader, we think of all these great, amazing things. And the big challenge for a lot of our organizations today is that we've separated managers and leaders. And as a result, we're faced with a lot of companies where we have leaders that don't know how to manage, and we have managers that don't know how to lead. Neither one of those is a good option for us. So what happens? If you have a leader that doesn't know how to manage, the leader, like you said, is good at engaging, empowering, inspiring. He has the big picture, the vision, the idea, the concept. He tells everybody where we should be going. But what that person doesn't know how to do is the strategy, the tactics, the process, the risk, the numbers, the hiring, the firing, the building the team, right? Those are the things that quote unquote managers are good at.
Did you know that 96% of the people who watch videos on this channel are not subscribed? That's pretty crazy, right? Make sure that you hit subscribe to the YouTube channel so you can get notified when more videos just like this one are released.
I see this firsthand because I live in San Francisco and there's leaders everywhere. Everybody has an idea for a product or a service or something that they want to create. And these are all technically leaders, but they aren't able to execute on these ideas. And because they're not able to execute on these ideas, they oftentimes fail. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we have managers that don't know how to lead. And in that type of environment, we have people that know how to do process and risk and numbers and strategy and tactics and all these other things, but they don't know how to engage and empower and inspire and build trust and motivate and have this big picture vision. And I think this is part of the reason why we have so many of our employees around the world today that are disengaged. I think the recent numbers from Gallup show that only 13% of employees around the world are engaged in the jobs that they do. 13%. That means 87% of employees around the world are just walking around like zombies, just showing up for a paycheck. They don't care why they're there, who they're working with, none of that matters. And I think it's precisely because of that reason. We have too many managers that don't know how to lead. And I think the problem is that we have been taking people, promoting them to become managers, and then giving them leadership training. But instead, I think we should be taking the leaders within our company and giving them management training. Now, in order to understand all of this and why all this is happening, we first have to understand a little bit about the background of management and why management came into existence to begin with. What's the point of a manager? Why are managers even in existence? And Anand mentioned Gary Hamel, who actually is one of the people that endorsed one of my books, and he's inspired me a lot and given me a lot to think about too. And he helped pioneer a lot of these concepts as well. So what is the point of a manager? If we all worked at the same company, and let's say I was your manager, which would be very unfortunate for you guys if I was your manager, but let's say I was your manager, what would my job be if we looked 30, 40, 50 years ago? My job would be to make sure that all of you show up on time, you wear the same outfit, you do the same job, you work a 9 to 5, you don't cause any problems, you don't ask any questions, you just shut up and do your job and leave. Right? That's the goal of a manager. I just need to make sure you show up and that everything keeps working. I'm a supervisor. I just watch people and make sure everything's okay. And not only that, but my job is to make sure that whatever the company is doing today, we could do tomorrow better, faster, and cheaper. That's it. That is the role of a manager. Now, there's a very fascinating story about a former submarine captain whose name is David Marquet. And David Marquet in the 90s was promoted to become a captain of a nuclear-powered submarine. How cool is that? A nuclear-powered submarine. He would be the captain of the whole thing. And he was given the call, and they said, David, you're going to be in command of the USS Olympia. And he was very excited. The USS Olympia was the Navy's proudest ship. The engagement was high, the turnover was low, and the crew consistently outperformed everybody else on training maneuvers. And so naturally, David was very, very excited about this opportunity. He spent weeks learning everything he could about the submarine, about everybody that worked on that submarine. He knew everything inside and out. A couple of weeks before he was supposed to take command of the USS Olympia, he gets a phone call. David, you're not going to be command of the USS Olympia anymore. Instead, you're going to take command of the USS Santa Fe. The USS Santa Fe was the exact opposite ship of the USS Olympia. The engagement was horrible. The turnover would make your head spin. They consistently outperformed everybody else, underperformed everybody else in the Navy. In fact, the previous captain had just quit, and they needed somebody else to fill in. That's how bad it was. But David thought, I just went through a year of leadership training, and I can do it. He was told that if you give good orders, then you'll have a great ship. So he spent a year going through leadership training and just figured, all I need to do is give good orders. If I give good orders, people will follow it, and everything will be just fine. So one day he takes his crew out on training maneuvers, and they simulate a nuclear meltdown. So he turns off the reactor, he submerges the submarine, and he gives out an order. He says, ahead 2/3. And ahead 2/3 means that the ship should be powered at 2/3 of its maximum capacity. And usually in the Navy, when the captain yells out an order, the navigator repeats the order, and then the helmsman actually executes on the order. So David yells out, ahead 2/3, and the navigator repeats the order, ahead 2/3, and nothing happens. David looks around and he sees the helmsman just sitting there in his seat, very uncomfortable, awkward. And David walks over to him and he says, what's the matter? Didn't you hear what I just said? I said ahead 2/3. And the helmsman looks at him and he says, yes, I heard your order, but there's a problem. And he says, what's the problem? And he says, this submarine doesn't have an ahead 2/3 setting. And so David turns to his navigator and he says, did you know that there's no ahead 2/3 on this submarine? And the navigator says, yes, sir, I did. And he says, then why the hell did you repeat the order that I gave if you knew it was wrong? And I'm sure some of you might know the answer that he gave. Because you told me to. Right? And this is the problem with a lot of our organizations today. Now, instead of separating managers and leaders, I think we need people that can do both. Right? Regardless of what you call them, the people that are running our organizations must be both. They must be people that can engage and inspire and empower, but they also must be the people that can look at the numbers, they can focus on the strategy and the tactics and the hiring and the firing and the building teams. We need people that do both. Now, if you were to look at some of the world's most known business leaders, people like Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, do you really think that these people only possessed half of these qualities? Do you really think that Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos only knew how to develop a vision? They only knew how to come up with a great product? Of course not. They were geniuses at building teams, at developing strategies, at focusing on tactics. Right? That's what made them so great. They could do both. And I think that's where we need to focus. Not separating managers and leaders, but intertwining those two things together.